Hi, welcome back to Couples Therapy Bites.
where we serve up bite-sized pieces of psychological education to make your relationship even better. I'm Stephen.
I'm Erin.
And this today is Tuesday's top 3. And we're going to be focusing on the top 3 keys for couples and coping in the midst of loss. If you were with us on Monday, Erin and I shared that this week marks the 1-year anniversary of the death of my dad and also the death of her mom. And we wanted to just share with y'all some of the things that have helped us through this really tough year. And so we kind of thought about it, and we came up with 3 key things that we think have been useful to us. And so number 3 would be to acknowledge.
When we flew back to St. Louis after learning about my mom, we were sitting down with the pastor who was going to be doing her service, and he said to us that we needed to basically accept that we had just landed on a new planet, that life as we had known it no longer existed, and we now currently lived on Mars. And that has been so helpful for us as we have moved each moment, sometimes moment to moment, sometimes day to day, through this past year. Because everything really is completely different personally, but for each of us, for our kids, for our family, and as a couple, it is just new terrain. And it's given us both the tool to say, like, this is new for both of us. This is new, and this is what has happened.
And there are some different dynamics. Erin's mom was a really big part of our life. My dad wasn't so much a part of our life. And so we have had to acknowledge that my relationship with my dad wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. But also, Erin's mom was such a fundamental kind of part of our family. We've had to acknowledge that way of being a family and living is gone. And we don't need to try and recreate that, or we have to change.
Nor could we.
Yeah, we have to change our expectations. And so we think that has been one of the most helpful things, is just for us to acknowledge that, and not try to live in the past, but to accept and acknowledge what's happening now in the present, and it'll help us move forward. So acknowledge is something that is really helpful. Number 2 would be to remember. I think that so often when there's loss and difficulty or grief, we spend a lot of energy trying to forget or to move away from that or to numb it, whatever we might do. We don't want to remember the difficult thing. But we found that it's really important for us to remember things that remind us of my dad or remind us of Erin's mom. For example, it's cold outside, it's getting close to the holiday season, and something that Erin's mom always did is she liked to make soup. It was just something kind of homey and heartwarming that she would do, and so Erin's been making a lot of soup in this last couple of months, and we talk about, do you remember how we called her mom Amma? Do you remember how Amma would make this soup during the holidays? And we talk about that. And that is really helpful. It's painful, it hurts, but we really think that it's important to acknowledge it in that moment. And so remembering, because it states what's true, and it keeps that kind of process of denial, which can feel maddening, not taking place. It's just an acceptance of what is true. So number 3, acknowledge. Number 2, remember. And number 1, the number 1 key for couples and coping in the midst of loss,
We think, or it's been helpful for us anyway, is to be kind. To be kind to yourself, to be kind to your spouse or partner. And that isn't always as easy as it seems. Grief and loss, it has all the emotions sometimes. Sometimes I feel like I'm feeling all the feels all at once, and that's okay.
I think, it's hard to be your best self in the midst of grief and loss. And so if you're struggling, to be a good partner, or to be a good parent, or to be a good employee, or to be a good family member or friend, whatever it might be in the midst of that loss, it's okay. Be kind to yourself. Recognize that it's going to be tough. But also, it can be really easy to be on edge as a couple, and to be more irritable, be more angry, to be more short-tempered with your partner, because you're just stressed. and it's important to recognize that you need to show one another kindness.
For us this past year, we've both noticed that we have a lot less to give and we both need more. So that obviously creates a pretty impossible situation. So
Yeah.
above all things, we feel like we need to be kind.
Yeah. And so for each of y'all, maybe you're going through a tough time of grief right now. Sit down with your partner and go through these things. How are you acknowledging that grief? How are you remembering the grief? How are you being kind to one another? And if you find that there's ways that you could be improving in those areas, name them, say them to your partner, kind of brainstorm, like, how could we do that? If you find that, oh, you know what, I feel like you are being really kind in this way, or I feel like we are remembering, hold on to that and say, let's keep doing it.
Yes.
And so if you find yourself in a season of grief as well, hopefully these 3 keys can be beneficial to you.
Do you have things? Do you have keys? Do you have things that have been helpful to you in seasons such as this? We honestly, most sincerely, would love to hear about that.
Yeah. So please subscribe to the channel, comment, and let us know. And we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.